All right, everybody, welcome back to the Sad Dads Game Podcast. My name is Eric, and I love indie games. So welcome to another episode of Eric's Indie Corner, where we break away from the sadness and the dadliness of our regular content. We get to talk a little bit about some of my favorite indie games. They might be new games, they might be old games, they might be well-known games, they might be games that you've never heard of before. But really the only criteria is that it's an indie game and that I like it. Today, we're going to be talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge, which is an awesome indie game. But one of the reasons I'm excited to talk about this game today is because it just launched a new DLC update with 2 new characters and remixed music soundtracks and stuff. And that just came out, depending on the time of this airing, about a week ago, a few days ago. We'll get into that a little bit more in a minute, but check that out. It's good stuff. For Shredder's Revenge, it's a game that is developed by Tribute Games and published by, I don't know if I'm saying this right because I've only ever read it, but Dotemu or Dotemu?
It's Dotemu.
Okay.
If it's Japanese, I have no idea.
Shan says it's Japanese definitively. Dotemu or Dotemu, we'll never know. This game, Shredder's Revenge, released June 16th of 2022 for all major consoles, PC and Mac, and then released a few months later for iOS and Android devices, with a Netflix subscription, which is a weird thing that I didn't know existed until a few months ago. There are certain mobile apps you can download and play if you have a Netflix subscription. Another thing is that we just touched on a minute ago, there's been a couple of DLC packs that have come out for it. Conventional Shell Shock for $7.99 added 2 playable characters, Usagi and Firai, and a survival roguelike mode. And then Radical Reptiles, which just barely launched for $3.99, includes 2 new characters, Mondo Gecko and Mona Lisa.
Beautiful sprites, but
Oh, yeah.
they were lizards of some type.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. The sprite work and the animation and art in this game is top notch, real punchy good stuff. And then as I was doing research for this, I found out a cool fact about the studio. So other notable games from Tribute Games, they've developed a game called Flint Hook. And then one of my favorite indie games that I haven't talked about on the channel yet, and I had no idea was developed by them, just completely missed that detail, but Panzer Paladin is an awesome game that I'll talk about on another episode, but also developed by them. So super cool. They also developed under direction from Ubisoft a long time ago, another beat 'em up called Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the game. And then Dotemu or Dotemu co-developed Streets of Rage 4. And so they've got a good pedigree of understanding good side-scroller beat 'em ups, which is what this game is. It's a classic side-scroller beat 'em up, harkening back to the older 90s days of the Turtles games for arcades and Super Nintendo, old NES, stuff like that. Lots of really great beat 'em up games. So yeah, we'll jump right into the story here. There's not a lot of story, of course. It's very Saturday morning cartoon vibes. Shredder is up to some shenanigans and you have to punch lots of guys and then you punch Shredder and then the game ends and it's great time.
Yeah, it pays, I think, one of the perfect tributes to the arcade game. Like it threw me right back into just pumping nickels, because I went to the nickelcade because I was not a rich child, and just pumping through nickels at the nickelcade playing any TMNT game. Just fantastic. Love it so much.
Arcade's the equivalent of the dollar theater where they just get like the arcade that the no longer deserve to be in the quarter arcade.
Could definitely give that kind of a vibe.
The life cycle of the arcade.
Yeah.
Once you're on the road to retirement, you go live at the Nickelcade for a while, see old folk homes for arcade machines. Yeah. So I like that Tucker mentioned that the visual style, the music, the general feel of the game really makes you feel like you're playing one of those older 90s turtle beat 'em up. But the controls feel a lot more modern. The animations are a little more modern. So it feels like how you remember those games as a kid, but it's polished up to a mirror shine and feels really good to play. So gameplay in this game is really excellent. It feels classic side-scroller beat 'em up. You can move from level to level. You punch lots of bad guys, and it has 1 to 6 player co-op, which is, I don't know if you've tried to play 6 player on this game, but it's nuts. Shannon, Tucker, and I played through this, the 3 of us. So we did 3 player before, but I've had nieces and nephews come over and we've done 6 player co-op, and it's absolute chaos, partially because there's 6 people on screen and partially because nieces and nephews and they're all children and I'm trying to teach them all how to play the game at the same time. But it's a really good time. So up to 6 people, and you can do that couch co-op or online. But yeah, what are your guys' thoughts on the just general gameplay of
Turtles? Was the most influential arcade game of my childhood. I was able to play it at the quarter arcade for a time, even
Like a
though,
rich
you know,
Did you take your private jet to the arcade in the Maldives?
speaking up from your city on the mountain in
Yeah.
Park City. No, I was known to be a couch diver for quarters. Is this a phenomenon everybody experienced?
I mean, I did it. Yeah. You find old
Yeah.
quarters in the couch.
So the 90s were glorious for this reason, where you could, as a child, have a passive income from looking in couches and in air vents, for some reason, collected
Payphones.
change was in such high excess that they would just end up in everywhere that something could fall into. And so there were plenty of arcade binges and like video games that I purchased purely by collecting quarters from cars and from couches over the course
People's
of a couple
pockets.
weeks.
Yeah.
Oh, and
Yeah.
going into your parents' office and then like scooping out their drawers.
Like the
Wherever
car
they keep
console.
They won't remember.
And I had
you
a
know,
quarter here. I probably did it. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Fantastic for a child because, especially if you weren't cool enough to have an allowance, this is how you made your money. But anyway, so I would take that money to the arcade and I would blow it on the Turtles. And Turtles in Time, I think, was our number one go-to. And it was an entire family thing. We have 5 siblings. We lived in a hotel for half a year. And so we would find all these quarters, run down there, play through our quarters within an hour because that's how long quarters would last in these machines. Adjusted for inflation, they were really taking people for a ride at the time.
Adjust for inflation. But yeah, again, I feel like the Shredder's Revenge does a really good job of, if you have any kind of nostalgia for arcade beat 'em ups or Ninja Turtle beat 'em ups, really scratches that itch. It feels like going to an arcade and playing through those old beat 'em ups, but you can do it from your living room. And there's a lot of little modern tweaks, like you can dodge. There's some more combos you can do. The controls are a little more refined. And Shan touched on it a little earlier in the episode, but the animations are buttery smooth. It's got a really good impact feel for when you're attacking enemies. The devs clearly spent a lot of time making the game feel really good to play. And I think that captures that old school nostalgia, but it has a lot of little modern tweaks that make it feel smooth and really nice to play today. It's one that if I'm just craving a little bit of want to play a game, I often will just sit down and I'll run through the campaign for a minute.
Yeah, if I remember right, we played through this game in one sitting. So it was just a few hours and it was just super fun. Yeah, it really had that arcade feeling and just like bonding. Even though we were doing it online, it almost feels like you have a joystick and your 2 buttons standing next to each other playing this game.
Yeah, it makes you feel like a kid again. Yeah, it's not a super duper long game, a lot like these beat 'em ups of old. It's a couple hours long, but I will say that there's a lot of extra modes and features that can really enhance that time. The game launched with 7 playable characters, and there are 4 more additional characters with the DLC packs. And if you want to level those characters up and unlock all their skills or whatever, you can play through the campaign once with each of those people, which is something that I have done, except for the DLC characters. I haven't quite finished it with the 2 of them yet because it just barely launched. But it's fun to just run through the campaign again. I play it with my daughters a lot. They really like the Ninja Turtle playing that game. And they also introduced in one of the DLC packs a survival style roguelike mode, which is something that I didn't think I would enjoy because I don't generally enjoy roguelike games. I don't like failing and then being kicked in the teeth and having to start all the way over. I usually find that more frustrating than rewarding, but I think that this mode does a good job of kind of supplementing the main game and being a little bit more snacky because the runs are nice and short. Get to the end, it takes maybe 20 minutes. So that's about as long as a run could be. And so I enjoyed that part of it. I think it's fun. So basically it just drops you in a little combat arena. You fight all the bad guys and then you move on to the next combat arena. You have to collect crystals to level up to get the combat arenas progressively more and more difficult based on how many crystals you collect. And so I thought it was fun. Do a run or 2 and then put it down and you can unlock more skins and costumes. There's all sorts of fun stuff. So it's a mode that I didn't initially think that I would enjoy, but I found enjoying quite a lot. I don't know if either of you guys, Shan or Tucker, if either of you guys played the DLC mode.
No, I similarly am frustrated with roguelikes for that reason. It's psychologically speaking, it's a negative feedback loop, right? So you're supposed to keep going despite it punishing you.
Yeah.
It sounds like they reward you with some upgrades so that they can try to cancel out the negative part of it. But also, I just realized like this is the perfect format for a roguelike so that you can have something novel to play in such a tight gameplay loop and always be surprised. So the arcade brawler, I don't know. The only roguelike I've liked up until now has been Returnal, and this might do it for me.
It's a fun one, and it comes with the DLC pack. So I really enjoy it. It's really small and snacky and fun enough to keep you engaged. It's not something that I feel like I could sit down with and play for hours and hours. Like I'll sit down and I'll do a run or two, and then I feel that's good. But even when you fail, because my only thing with roguelites is when I fail and when I die, I feel like it's like I got to start all the way over, and it's more frustrating. But for this one, it's just I'll just go again. It has that feel of putting quarters into an arcade machine. You're like, I'll just go again. No big deal. And so I think it captures that fun arcadey aspect pretty well.
Speaking of which, what is the perfect length for an arcade game? Because it has to be just long enough, because you have to never be able to finish it in a regular arcade run, right? Back in the 90s, you did
So
run
you
off
keep getting
to the
those
arcade.
quarters.
Maybe you have 30 to 60 minutes, you're never going to finish, but it has to be just long enough that you want to set aside a Saturday one month to run out there with $20 of quarters and pump them in no matter what it costs so that you can win the game. And I think that's about 2 to 3 hours. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I'd say for me, I think that's the sweet spot.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm sure parents were thrilled at our behavior.
You need how many dollars to play this game?
You want me to do what with my Saturday?
Sure, I'll just sit in the arcade and I'll watch you have fun. Sounds great. Yeah. We've talked a little bit about the gameplay, a little bit about the story, and what in particular about this game, Shannon Tucker, what's something that stood out to you as a highlight or something that you guys really enjoyed?
To me, I was a big fan of Castle Crashers for a long time.
That's going to be another episode for sure.
And this really hit that side scroller brawler thing, but with just the right hint of nostalgia. So for me, it was a very nostalgic experience. And that's what I loved the most about it. On the surface, it's a beautiful, fun looking brawler game. But personally, it just takes me back to childhood, pumping nickels in my case into this machine with a friend or two.
I think the thing that caught me most when I first got into it is like how they modernized the sprite work. Just absolutely nailed the shading and like modernization of like their dimensions. They're vibrant. They really pop out against that desaturated background in a way that feels like a 90s cartoon, right? Because they usually have those like matte painted backgrounds with these cell shaded sheets that are on top of it. So they're always a lot more vibrant than that background. And so it really gave me that aesthetic that brought me back. And then just like the crunchiness of it, I think sure there can be like a little nuance to mechanics if you want to engage, but that's not really what it's about. It's about mindlessly mashing any button that you can and still feeling satisfied. That, like we knock on this now, right? In modern games is we don't want the button mashers. We don't want to just hit A forever. But in these games, it's rewarded. You want to just hit things mindlessly and plow through the game. For some reason, that's still satisfying in this genre.
I think that there's something, because we see so much specific control and less button mashing in a lot of modern games, there's something really cathartic about booting up a retro-inspired beat 'em up and just smashing buttons and punching bad guys. And there's just something that just tickles that nostalgia part of your brain. Is like, I remember being a kid and when controllers only had 2 buttons and you just smashed the 2 buttons until all the bad guys were gone.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I imagine this will be the type of game that I would first play with Alexis, right? With my child, because she can probably already play it now at 2.5. She only has to know which button to push.
Yeah, it does have a pretty simple control scheme. That's one of the ones that like I said, I play with my kids. I have 2 daughters that are 6 and almost 8. We have a good time playing this Turtles game together. It's one of their favorite go-tos.
One thing I thought of was the combat animation. And this might just be in my head, but if I remember right, when you hit somebody, there's this slight little like pause that's really satisfying that I just love so much. As far as just, you're just like, yeah, I got it. Mikey's my go-to in these games. Just whacking a bad guy in the face with some nunchucks and having that action pause is just,
as a person, as a person who has spent a lot of time in this game with each character, I can say pretty confidently that even it's going to sound biased because Michelangelo is my favorite turtle, but Michelangelo is the best character in this game. as in my humble opinion. They're all good for different reasons, but I've played each character a long time. Yeah, I feel like it's the pumpkin spice latte of Ninja Turtles, but I got to be true to myself. I'm a Michelangelo man, and I always have been.
Wow. So brave.
So basic white guy.
A basic white guy. I love Michelangelo. I don't know what to tell you.
I do want to call out, similar to that, my favorite effect in this and any game like this is whenever you can roll against an enemy and grab them and throw them against the screen.
That's super fun.
And just like that cheap effect of there being a 3D effect of it being thrown at the screen and then smashing it. For some reason, that is always the best animation. Is always the best attack that you can do, and you can never overuse it.
Yeah. It goes back to that button mashing catharsis. It feels good to just throw foot soldiers right at the screen. I touched on a little bit. Favorite turtle?
No, Michelangelo, or not Michelangelo. I'm not a basic white guy. Mikey, 100%.
Donatello.
Solid choice.
For some reason, I just always, whatever that stick is called.
The bow staff. Wow, Shan. Ooh, we gotta cut that out.
Yeah,
nerds are gonna eat you alive.
Yeah.
Shan doesn't know his Ninja Turtles, so that's embarrassing.
I actually do get confused from time to time between Donatello and Raphael. For some reason, I was really drawn to Raphael's alpha energy, but for some reason, Mikey was a little too cartoonish for me. And now I'm an idiot if I didn't just choose Mikey's. I could retcon my
He's
childhood.
A party dude.
For some reason, like as a
party
kid, for some reason I didn't like that he wasn't serious, but now I get it.
Donatello does
was smoking a blunt like half the time, down in pizza with the nunchucks at people.
That's why they were always hungry.
Yeah.
Always wanting pizza.
Oh, also side note, just for our listeners, if you notice our sprites for the Sad Dad podcast, we are all different Ninja Turtle colors.
Tucker dibs to orange, and so I went with red, which I'm wearing a red shirt now, so it works. Another thing I want to touch on, because I feel like it would be crime not to, and I feel like I talk about this every single Eric's Indie episode, but the soundtrack for this game is an absolute banger. It's spectacular. I took some notes because I feel like these people deserve credit. So the soundtrack was composed by a man named T. Lopez. Fun fact, he also composed the Sonic Mania soundtrack, which is another game that we'll probably cover later on, and another soundtrack that absolutely slaps. So he's an extremely talented composer. T. Lopez really knocked it out of the park with this soundtrack. All of the soundtrack are really punchy. They're very upbeat. They really get you in the mood to punch some goons. And they have some tracks on there featuring some vocals and different instruments, which is very cool. They've got contributions from guitarist Johnny Atma, rappers and Ghostface Killah, Raekwon, and singer Mike Patton. So if I mispronounced any of those names, I'm very sorry.
Yeah,
just really awesome soundtrack.
I love hearing Eric pronounce rappers' names.
Yeah, I listen to a lot of rap. I don't know if you can tell. Let's see. Mega Rand. Did I say that right?
I'm just now learning that the composer is Portuguese, and so he's born in Coimbra, which I've been there. So his name in full is actually Tiago Lopes, but he goes by T. Lopes.
I pronounced it Lopez, so I did it completely wrong. So go to Shan for when I'm doing my research, I'm reading things. I'm not listening to audio.
I'm sure Portuguese people love their name being pronounced as you would pronounce them in Spanish.
Yes. So apologize sincerely. Look to Shan for the proper pronunciation of that. So yeah, another quick fun fact before we wrap this up here. The game features voice work from a lot of the original cast of Ninja Turtles, which is pretty cool. So Cam Clark, Barry Gordon, Rob Coulson, and Townsend Coleman all reprised their roles as Leonardo, Donatello, Raphael, and Michelangelo respectively. And some of those people did the voices as well for some of the villains like Bebop and Rocksteady. Unfortunately, Shredder could not reprise his role because the actor that plays Shredder had passed. They got a lot of the original voice cast, which I thought was super cool. It really reminded me of my waking up Saturday morning and watching Ninja Turtles as a kid, and hearing those voices again was a cool little extra detail that they put in there. So we talked about it a little bit earlier, but playtime, the game runs for about 2 or 3 hours for a single playthrough, but you can really pad that out if you want to beat it with more characters or play the survival mode. I've probably pumped about 20 hours into the survival mode. It comes with 7 playable characters, 11 if you include the DLC. You can get it on Windows, Linux, Switch, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, iOS, and Android with Netflix subscription. And it's $24.99 for the base game. And then if you want to get the base game plus Dimensional Shell Shock, $29.68. And then base game with all the DLCs, $32.99. It's a bargain. It's a great game. Lots of really excellent stuff in there. One of the new updates that just came out has remixes for all of the tracks in the soundtrack that have a more retro 8-bit and 32-bit feel, which is a super fun way you can turn on the different soundtrack and play through the game again and get to see the changes they made there. So it's an excellent game. Check it out. It's good stuff.
As for classics, what's the best Turtles game? Because for me, it was Turtles in Time.
Yeah. I'm pretty partial to, I know Turtles in Time is probably objectively the best game, but I played a lot of Ninja Turtles 3, the Manhattan Project, for the NES when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I played that game constantly all the time as a kid with my older brother and I. So that was probably my favorite just for nostalgia reasons, but Turtles in Time is solid second choice for me.
Yeah, for me, it was Turtles in Time.
Arcade or Super Nintendo version? Because did you know they're slightly different?
I only played the arcade version.
I don't know the difference, but I had more fun, I think, ultimately with the Super Nintendo version.
The Super Nintendo has some Mode 7 inspired bonus levels, as well as some of the sprite work and audio design is a little bit different.
So Mode 7, for those who don't know, is the technology in a Super Nintendo that allowed them to distort the background sprite so that they could produce a 3D-like effect.
Yeah. Games like F-Zero and Mario Kart and Yoshi's Island used it a fair bit. Star Fox was a different technology. All right, guys. Well, this has been another episode of Eric's Indie Corner. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.
See ya.
Bye.